I had just gotten home from work, expecting another ordinary evening. I wasn't anticipating a deep conversation or an argument, just a quiet dinner and maybe a movie before bed. But as soon as I walked in, I could tell something was off. My wife was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, eyes locked onto the TV like she was bracing herself for something. When I greeted her, she barely acknowledged me. I figured she was in one of her moods, so I didn't push it. I went about my routine, changed out of my work clothes, and sat down at the table. That's when she finally spoke. "I just want to make something clear," she said flatly. "From now on, intimacy happens when I feel like it. It's on my schedule, not yours." She didn't say it with frustration, sadness, or any emotion at all. It was a cold, calculated statement. Like she had rehearsed it, like it wasn't up for debate. I sat there for a moment, waiting for some kind of explanation. Was she going through something? Was she upset with me? Had something happened that I missed? But she didn't add anything else. She just stared at the TV as if what she had just said was completely normal. "Where is this coming from?" I finally asked. She shrugged. "I just don't want to feel pressured anymore." Pressured? That word caught me off guard. I had never pressured her for anything. I had always respected her space, her moods, her needs. But now, suddenly, I was the problem. I leaned back in my chair, processing. "So just to be clear," I said slowly, "you decide when. I don't get a say in it at all." She nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah, that's how it's going to be." I should have felt angry, maybe even heartbroken. But what I felt, more than anything, was confused. This wasn't some small change. This was a complete shift in our marriage dynamics. And the way she was acting, it wasn't like she was asking for understanding or trying to work through something. It was like she had already made up her mind, and I was just supposed to accept it. That's when a thought crept into my mind, one I didn't want to consider but couldn't ignore. Was there someone else? It was the only thing that made sense, the sudden detachment, the indifference, the need to control when and how we were intimate, if at all. She wasn't just pulling away emotionally. She was establishing a new dynamic where I was no longer an active participant in our marriage, just a bystander. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I let it go, for the moment. Maybe she was just going through something. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I already knew. I had seen enough in life to recognize the signs. And the biggest one? She wasn't afraid of losing me. A wife who loves her husband, even if she's struggling, would approach this differently. She would try to explain. She would want to reassure him, to make things work. But she didn't. She just laid down the new rules and expected me to comply, without hesitation, without question. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to find a way to rationalize it. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe this was just a rough patch. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The second a woman stops caring whether or not you stay, she's already moved on. The only thing left to figure out was whether she had someone waiting in the background, or if she was simply keeping me around as a backup plan. The days that followed felt different. Not because we had a fight, or because something had changed in my routine, but because of the way my wife carried herself, like nothing had happened. She stuck to her usual habits. She woke up, scrolled through her phone, went to work, came back, and sat in front of the TV. There was no tension, no awkwardness from her side. It was as if our conversation had never even taken place. But for me, everything was different. I started noticing things I hadn't paid much attention to before. The way she was always busy on her phone, yet quick to turn the screen away when I walked by. The way she suddenly had new clothes, ones I had never seen her wear before, tighter, more revealing. The way she would leave the house at odd hours, always with an excuse that didn't quite add up. I wasn't looking for problems, but they were right in front of me. At home, things felt mechanical. We spoke when necessary, but the warmth was gone. She had no interest in conversations beyond the basics. If I asked about her day, I'd get a short, uninterested answer. If I tried to make plans for the weekend, she'd say she was too tired. But the exhaustion didn't stop her from going out with her friends, dressing up, coming home late, and acting like it was none of my business. That's when it truly sank in. She wasn't just pulling away emotionally. She had already moved on mentally. I started testing things out, just to see how far gone she really was. One night, I casually mentioned planning a trip for us, something we hadn't done in a while. Her reaction? Barely a shrug. No excitement, no interest, not even a fake attempt at enthusiasm. It was like I had suggested a chore instead of a getaway. Then there was the intimacy, or lack of it. She had made her rules clear, and she followed them religiously. Any form of affection was gone. No hugs, no random kisses, no playful moments. If I touched her shoulder or leaned in for even a small sign of connection, she stiffened up like I was a stranger invading her space. And yet, despite all this, she wasn't leaving. That was the part that didn't make sense at first. If she had checked out, why stay? Why not end it and move on? But then I realized, it wasn't about love. It wasn't about us. It was about security. The house we lived in was rented, and the lease was in her name. But I was the one covering most of the expenses. The bills, the groceries, the little comforts that made her life easy. I was the one making sure everything ran smoothly. She wasn't keeping me around because she wanted to. She was keeping me around because it was convenient. She had built herself a perfect setup. She could do whatever she wanted, live as if she were single, and still have the stability of a husband who provided. It was a backup plan in case things didn't work out elsewhere. And for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. Not a partner. Not someone who cared. Just someone who was using me as a safety net. And I wasn't going to be that person for much longer. Once I saw things for what they really were, I couldn't unsee them. Every little action, every moment of indifference, every excuse, it all pointed to the same conclusion. She wasn't just distant. She wasn't just cold. She was waiting. Waiting for something. Or rather, someone. I started paying closer attention to her patterns. Not because I wanted to catch her in the act, but because I needed to confirm what I already knew. And the signs were everywhere. Her phone never left her side. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and she'd be lying in bed, screen glowing, scrolling through messages. If I walked too close, she'd lock it instantly. One time I sat next to her while she was on the couch, and I caught a glimpse of a conversation before she tilted the phone away. It wasn't some casual chat. There was a rhythm to it, the kind of flow that only comes from flirting. Then there were her sudden plans. Before we used to plan things together. Even small things like grocery shopping or watching a show. Now she was always busy. Drinks with friends. A work event. A girls' night out that seemed to happen almost every weekend. And every time she left, she looked different. I don't mean just dressing up. She glowed. New perfume. New makeup. Clothes that she never wore around me. She put effort into looking good, just not for me. At first I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe she really was just out with friends. But then one night, the confirmation I had been waiting for arrived. She had left for another girls' night. The same vague excuse she had been using for weeks. I had stopped asking questions because I already knew I wouldn't get a real answer. But this time she made a mistake. She had left her laptop open on the dining table. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just moving it aside to set my plate down. But then as the screen lit up, a message popped up. It wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from work. It was from him. The message wasn't anything dramatic. No confessions of love. No plans to run away together. Just a simple, "Can't wait to see you tonight." That was all I needed. I didn't touch anything. I didn't go through her conversations. I didn't need to. The answer had been right in front of me all along. She was waiting for him to commit, keeping me around until she was sure he would. I was just the backup, the insurance policy in case things didn't go her way. And that was the moment I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to beg for answers or demand an explanation. What was the point? She had already checked out. I just needed to make sure that when I left, it wouldn't be on her terms. It was almost laughable. She had no idea that I knew. No idea that the safety net she had been keeping in place was about to disappear. I had no intention of arguing. No dramatic confrontations. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses or apologies that wouldn't be sincere. I was done. But if she thought she had me trapped, she was in for a surprise. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. I made coffee, sat down at the table, and started planning. Step by step, how much money I needed to withdraw, which accounts I needed to separate, what belongings I was taking with me. I wasn't going to leave anything behind that could give her the slightest chance of pulling me back into this mess. She woke up, did her usual routine, barely acknowledging me, glued to her phone, lost in whatever conversation she was having. I just watched. She really thought she had it all under control. That week, I moved in silence. I started shifting money into a new account. I found a place to stay, a temporary one, just until I got settled somewhere better. I took important documents and small valuables out of the house little by little, so she wouldn't notice anything missing. Every time she went out to meet her friends, I took another step toward walking away for good. By the time I was ready, I had already distanced myself emotionally. There was no sadness, no hesitation. Just the satisfaction of knowing that she had no idea what was coming. And then came the final move. I waited until she was out of the house again, probably with him. I packed up the rest of my things, everything I needed, and left the keys on the kitchen counter. No note, no message, nothing. She had spent all this time treating me like an option, like I was just there, waiting to be discarded whenever she was ready. Instead, I discarded her. Hours later, my phone rang, once, twice, then again. I ignored it. Then the texts started coming in. The first few were simple. "Where are you? Did you take your stuff?" Then came the real panic. "What are you doing? We need to talk." I smiled. We had nothing to talk about. She must have thought she had unlimited time to make her decision to secure her backup plan before moving on completely. But she had underestimated me, and now she was stuck. The house was still under her name. The bills, all on her now. The life she had been enjoying with my support, over. When she finally stopped trying to contact me, I knew she had realized the truth. She wasn't the one in control, I was. The silence was the best part. After the initial wave of texts and calls, she stopped. No more desperate messages. No more attempts to talk things through. She had finally realized that I wasn't coming back. That was enough for me. I had washed my hands of the entire situation. I settled into my new place quickly. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. No cold silences. No tension in the air. Just peace. And for the first time in a long time, I actually felt free. I didn't waste time dwelling on her. I had already grieved this relationship while I was still in it. By the time I walked out, there was nothing left to mourn. I focused on my new life, getting back into hobbies I had neglected, reconnecting with old friends, and just enjoying my own company without feeling like I was living in someone else's shadow. But then, just as I had expected, she resurfaced. Not directly. No, she was too proud for that. She made sure I saw it. The new guy. Some mutual friends mentioned it, not realizing I already knew. A younger guy. Flashier. The kind who loved attention and spent more time trying to impress people than actually building anything meaningful. The kind she had probably fantasized about while she was still with me. I didn't care. Let her have him. Let her believe she had upgraded. I had no interest in watching the show, but life has a way of playing its own jokes. It didn't take long before the cracks in her perfect new relationship started to show. At first, it was subtle. Little things I heard in passing. How he was always out with his friends. How he never seemed to prioritize her. Then the complaints became more serious. Money problems. Arguments. She had gone from a stable, secure life to this, and it was clear she wasn't handling it well. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. She had thought she was replacing me with someone better. Instead, she had been replaced. When she started demanding that he step up, help with rent, pay bills, be responsible, he did what I knew he would. He walked away. No discussions. No fights. Just gone. The same way she had assumed I would stick around while she figured out her options, she had assumed this guy would do the same. But he had no reason to. She wasn't a priority to him. Just a fun distraction. Something to pass the time. And now, without him, she had nothing. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I just waited. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. I didn't have to wait long. She had lost her safety net. The guy she thought was her future had dropped her the second she became an inconvenience. And now, with the bills piling up, the rent past due, and no one left to bail her out, she did the only thing she could think of. She came back to me. I saw her message pop up one afternoon. A simple, "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at it for a second before laughing. Of course she thought she could just slide back in like nothing had happened. Like I would just be sitting around waiting for her to figure things out. I ignored it. A few days later, she tried again. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I think we should talk in person." This time I replied, "About what?" She hesitated. "I just feel like we ended things too fast. I miss you." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead I sent back, "Miss me? Or miss not paying rent?" She didn't reply right away. When she finally did, it was a weak attempt at pretending it wasn't about that. "It's not about money. I just realized I made mistakes." Mistakes. That was rich. I agreed to meet, not because I was considering anything, but because I wanted to see just how desperate she had become. And sure enough, the moment she sat across from me, it was written all over her face. She looked exhausted, stressed. The arrogance she once carried was gone. She started with small talk, trying to ease into it, acting like she genuinely cared about how I'd been. But I wasn't interested in playing games. "What do you want?" I asked. She sighed. I miss you. I think we rushed into the divorce." "Maybe we should," I started laughing. Right there, in the middle of the cafe, loud enough for people to turn and look. She froze. "What's so funny?" I wiped a fake tear from my eye. "You think we rushed? That's hilarious." She squirmed in her seat. "I'm serious." "Oh, I know," I said, still grinning. "That's what makes it so funny." Her face turned red. "You don't have to be an ass about it." "An ass?" "Oh no, sweetheart. You don't get to play the victim here." I leaned forward. "Tell me, When exactly did you start missing me? When the bills hit? When lover boy left you hanging? When you realized you're not as special as you thought you were? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I shook my head. You thought you had options. You thought you were trading up. But guess what? You were just a placeholder to him. Just like you tried to make me. I leaned back, smirking. And now, you're nothing. She looked down, blinking fast like she was trying not to cry. I wasn't moved. I stood up, tossing a few bucks on the table. Good luck with rent. I hear your mom's got a couch. And with that, I walked away. I heard later that she did exactly what I expected, went crawling back to her mother's house, got a job as a cashier at some supermarket, the kind of job she used to mock people for having. Meanwhile, I moved on, happier than ever. She thought I'd be her backup plan. Turns out, she never even had one. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected one more videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.